Hello, everyone. Welcome to this evening's virtual award ceremony for the Bread and Roses Award for Radical Publishing. My name is Mary. I run the Lighthouse Edinburgh's Radical Bookshop, and we are proud members of the Alliance of Radical Booksellers, who are behind this very brilliant prize that it is my pleasure, our pleasure, to shepherd into another year. So welcome to you all, wherever you are in the world. I've seen the Netherlands, London, Yorkshire, wherever you are. Thank you for being with us tonight to celebrate some incredible books. But first, to tell us a little bit more about the prize, I'm going to invite Ross on screen from Five Leaves Books, who is going to tell you a little bit more about the Alliance. Ross, if I get you, there we go. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us. Will you tell us a little bit more about the Alliance and about the award?
Thanks, Mary, and welcome to everybody. Good evening. I'm from Five Leaves Bookshop in Nottingham. I'm one of the trustees of the Bread and Roses Award for Radical Publishing. The Bread and Roses Award, in case you don't know, took its name from the Bread and Roses strike in Massachusetts, Lawrence, Massachusetts in 1912, which was a huge strike which became known as the Bread and Roses strike, where people struck for bread and roses. But actually it came from, well, people argue where it came from. There was a poem in 1911 by James Oppenheim, which used the words bread and roses, and it became a song. And the most popular occurrence of it in recent times was in the film Pride. And I played that just before we went online. And every time I play that, I cry. So I should have done it a few minutes earlier. The prize itself, and the Bread and Roses phrase has been used any number of times over the years for what the Lawrence strikers were in favour of and what we as a organisation, the Alliance of Radical Booksellers, are in favour of. The prize has been going since 2012. The first prize winner was the late David Graeber, who did a book on debt, the first 5,000 years of debt. And if you look at the Bread and Roses website and you look back over all of the prize winners and all of the shortlisted authors over since 2012, you get a very good impression what radical bookselling and radical publishing has been like, and what are the big issues that we've been concerned about, and actually the small issues that we've been concerned about as well, that have been presented well by our authors. The Alliance of Radical Booksellers was formed a year or two before the award at a conference in Liverpool, which was hosted by News from Nowhere, one of the very long-standing radical bookshops in Britain. It's a light touch organisation. We have a website and you'll see the members, which include new bookshops, second-hand bookshops and others. And as well as the Bread and Roses Award for Radical Publishing, it spawned the Little Rebels Award for Radical Children's Books. And in the way that sometimes happens, the children are bigger than the adults. And the Little Rebels Award has really taken off in ways that we couldn't really imagine happening. So Alliance of Radical Booksellers, Bread and Roses, Little Rebels. So over the generations, we hope to see socialism or green socialism or anarchism, because we believe in all of these things in our time. And this award, the Bread and Roses Award, is very much part of that. So thank you all for attending. Good luck to all the winners now. Well, you're all winners now. Good luck to the shortlisted writers now. Good luck to the winner. And I will now disappear, leaving the friendly face of my colleague Kate Templar, whose laptop I'm using tonight, on screen. It's not that we're quickly transitioning, it's that I've had to borrow her laptop because mine wasn't working too well. So I'll be here in the background listening. Bye just now.
Thank you so much for that, Ross. And thank you to Five Leaves, who are like husbands, have been a bastion of radical books and radical publishing for me as a reader. and a guiding light for Lighthouse. And the Alliance of Radical Booksellers really do. I recommend if you're ever traveling anywhere in the UK, like just look up the website and there's a list of the most amazing places. We are here tonight to celebrate an incredible set of books and an incredible set of writers who have brought us these books. And one of the things that we're about at Lighthouse, and I think runs across the currents for the Alliance of Radical Booksellers, is that we believe that books can make the world a better place, that we can affect change, and that we have a responsibility to affect change, and that books are a part of doing that. And what I love about this award is that it showcases books that are doing that with every line, with every chapter. They are opening hearts and minds of readers and really giving us something that we can work with. This particular list, just to go through, is a final five from 43 books from publishing giants, but also from smaller and radical presses. And they examine disability rights, queer rights, legacies of empire, race, education, and they need to radically change our criminal justice system. The shortlisted books, as I think we've said before, toes the line between intimate personal reflections and confident political analysis seeking to inspire change. This is an incredibly current set of books on issues we should all be grappling with. So to introduce each of these books in their own words, I have our shortlisted authors, and then after they've all introduced them, you have a chance to ask some questions in the online chat, which is just below the video, and then afterwards we will announce our winner. So arbitrarily picking them, first up I'm going to invite Kojo Koram, author of Uncommon Wealth, to pop up on screen if you're able to enable. Brilliant. And it is over to you, Kojo, to say a few words over a few minutes about the book and what it is putting into the world. And if you want to read a section from it, that would also be very welcome.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And yeah, just a thank you to everyone behind the Bread and Roses Prize. This is trying to make sure I'm in frame. Is that coming over okay?
Yeah.
Brilliant. To everyone involved in the Bread and Roses Prize for shortlisting Uncommon Wealth. This is a prize that I've admired for so long, and you know, the Lighthouse and Five Leaves are amongst my favorite bookshops in the country, and so I'd also recommend anybody who's able to visit them. To introduce the book that has been shortlisted on Uncommon Wealth, it's a book now that you know, feels like, I'm sure many of the other authors will attest to, feels like was written kind of in a different era, but has been fortunate to take a life of its own, in that it was very much written, I think, in response to the eruption of interest in matters of decolonization that swept through the British Public Forum, particularly in the aftermath of the 2020 Black Lives Matter movement. And it was really an intervention to try and kind of redirect the direction of conversation away from kind of culture war, identity politics topics, you know, which started off, I think, legitimately thinking about, you know, issues like, you know, what statues we have in our public square, you know, what our curriculums we read when we go to university. But I think the media landscape started to make it a more and more frivolous conversation, in which it was endless debates around, you know, should we sing Land of Hope and Glory at the national proms, or, you know, should Fawlty Towers be cancelled due to its imperial legacy? And I was just, nobody watches any of these things anyway, is what I felt. But I also felt that it was moving away from the core legacy of empire, which is actually material, which is the way in which it contributed to the very unequal system of capitalism that we have to this day, including things like our tax laws, our laws around the border, the way in which corporations are protected by the state. A lot of these have their legacies in the British Empire. And I didn't think we could start dealing with our material inequality without wrestling with that imperial legacy. And in terms of the part of the book that I've been invited to read from, I thought I would just share a little bit to try and show how the imperial, post-imperial mind was tied to trying to create a society that accelerates wealth inequality and the protection of assets from democratic obligation. And this is a section that introduces a character that I think most people are familiar with as one of the kind of leading British imperial figures, Enoch Powell, but shows a different side of him. So not the Rivers of Blood side that people might be more familiar with, but the side of him that was aligned with a lot of the godfathers of what we now call neoliberalism. People like Friedrich Hayek, people like the Mont Pelerin Society, people like the Institute of Economic Affairs, which was, of course, Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng's favorite think tank. And I wanted to share a little bit about, Powell's relationship to them to try and show that connection between inequality and this legacy of empire. So, and this is from the third chapter on the border. So it says, by talking too much, Powell and Joseph managed to disqualify themselves from leadership positions that many assumed were their destiny. Short on friends, they were fortunate to receive the ongoing support of the Institute of Economic Affairs and also a few of their colleagues in the House of Commons who would also show them sympathy. One of the few to still advocate on their behalf in Parliament was an ambitious rising political star called Margaret Thatcher. In 1974, when the establishment of the Conservative Party was falling over itself to put distance between the party and Powell, the recently deposed former Education Secretary Thatcher wrote a full-page article in the Times defending both Powell and Joseph as fine academic minds. For Thatcher, who had admired Powell for years and worked closely with Joseph throughout her political career, the more extreme views of either man should not override the fact that they have both landed on the right answer regarding what she considered to be the main problem facing Britain, the economy. Powell and Joseph, in collaboration with the Institute of Economic Affairs, have been pretty much the lone voices in the wilderness shouting about the dangers of a planned economy. They brought the ideas of cutting-edge free market economists like Friedrich Hayek to mainstream politics and to Thatcher's attention. One of the key changes they wished for was for a change in the way that money moved across the world, and it was an issue, perhaps more than any other, that Powell would influence Thatcher. Alongside the Institute of Economic Affairs, Powell was committed to challenging the constraints that Keynesianism had put on the market at a global level. Often forgotten amid the controversy that descended on Powell in 1968 is that he gave another speech that year in which he had shouted about the no border side of his global vision. Just a few months after, in which he had illustrated the no border side of his global vision. Just a few months after he delivered the Rivers of Blood speech, Powell spoke at a meeting of the influential Mont Pelerin Society. This speech, called The Fixed Exchange Rate and Dirigism, might have less eye than the Rivers of Blood, but in its own way was just as significant for understanding the direction that our world has taken over the past few decades. For while Powell, borders were needed to contain people within their proper place, for him, capital should be free to move across the world as it wished. I'll leave that now, and I look forward to hearing from the other shortlisted authors as well. But thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Kojo. Next up, again, arbitrarily, I'm going to invite Ione Gamble up for Poor Little Sick Girls. There we go.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
I am Ione. I wrote Poor Little Sick Girls. It is an essay collection exploring chronic illness. I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease when I was 19, but also different facets of social politics through the lens of chronic illness, specifically feminism and online feminist culture. I was on the internet a lot as a teenager, and obviously as an adult. I also run a feminist arts and culture publication called Polyester. And through that work, I kind of saw the rise of individualist feminism in terms of feminism that does not think about the collective, but rather individual empowerment, choice feminism, and how it was kind of like ruining a movement and making us all think that we could find emancipation through buying the right kind of razor and having like a nice bath. I think me being chronically ill managed to give me a perspective that was more highly critical of these things, and to really kind of see the power in community, and that community really is the only way to solve any of our problems, really, especially when it comes to feminism and organizing in a feminist political manner. So the collection looks at a lot of wide-ranging different things, from like medical misogyny to also how self-care has been corrupted when it started as like a highly political movement that was used during the civil rights era to provide healthcare, to like plug the gap between government and the people when it comes to healthcare. And now, yeah, it's been corrupted by kind of like big beauty companies, to how the internet rose, how feminism rose through the internet. I'm trying to remember what else is in there. Lots of stuff, basically. I'm not going to read because in true poor little sick girl fashion, I actually started some new meds last week, which have given me absolutely massive brain fog, which I'm not sure if that is obvious right now or not. Hopefully it's not too obvious. But it is amazing to be nominated, and it's so lovely to see that the book has resonated with people on like a few different levels, whether they are also a chronically ill disabled person and have sort of found comfort in the reading, or whether it's sort of exposed how chronically ill and disabled people are treated, or people that have found themselves annoyed with how the internet kind of casts a neoliberal lens on everything, and our way out of the sort of digital and physical hellscape of individualized politics. But yeah, thank you so much for having me. And sorry, I'm not reading. I would make a bad job of it.
No, you did great, and through the brain frog as well. Well done.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. And good luck to all the nominated authors. I love all the books; they're amazing.
Thank you. All right, next in my stack, I have This Arab is Queer, an anthology by LGBTQ Arab writers, edited by Elias Shassan, who I'm going to invite to pop his camera on. Hiya. To tell us a bit more about the book as its editor.
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's an honor to be here and an honor to be shortlisted for the Bread and Roses. So thank you so much for having me. So I edited a collection of essays, short memoirs, and creative nonfiction writing from 18 contributors around the world, and they were all queer Arabs. Some of us, like myself, live in the diaspora. Some of them live in the Arab world itself. And it's just a collection of different stories sharing their experiences on what it's like to be queer Arab. Some of the stories touch on that experience indirectly. Some of them are quite direct. And yeah, it was just, I purposely wanted to create a book that was was timeless, because this is an ongoing discussion. It's particularly been quite pertinent in recent months with what's happening in Gaza and pinkwashing and what have you. But this book came out long before that. It came out in 2022, and my idea for the book first came around during the pandemic. It crystallized during the pandemic, when I had a lot of time on my hands. But it's something that had been bubbling on my mind for a while, and I guess the turning point was when the UK, the Canadian, and the EU embassies in Baghdad at one point decided to fly the rainbow flag on their premises for Idaho Day without consulting the local community about that. And because of that, it provoked a wave of homophobic attacks in the queer community in Iraq. And to this day, the Iraqi government is trying to recriminalize homosexuality, and it kind of started around then. So but then there were other stuff leading up to it. And I worked in queer media back in Australia, if people haven't picked up on my accent yet. I was an editor of a queer publication called Star Observer, the longest running queer publication in Australia. I'm the only editor in its history for more than 40 years that come from a non-English speaking cultural background. And while I was editor there, I just happened to be it just happened to be at a time when ISIS was running rampant and doing awful things, horrendous things in Syria and Iraq. And one of those things was when they were throwing gay men off the rooftops blindfolded and stuff like that. They were dominating headlines. And that sort of around that time, I just felt really helpless because one, I mean, there was the media blackout. There was no way we could access it, see what the real story is. But at the same time, I've just noticed a lot of the discourse in the media and on social media with people talking about us and over us rather than giving platform for us to speak for ourselves. And so yeah, so these sorts of stories definitely need to be told. But this what happened with ISIS was a prime example of when when our voices just weren't really given any platforms. And I sort of started noticing, especially me coming from queer media, when I left it, I sort of had that perspective. And when I moved to London, the distance and be able to look back on it, I guess I just noticed that, you know, every time there is something regarding queer ads in the headlines in the media or on social media, it always seems to be in response to something. It always seems to be someone had to approve our stories before it was published, and it always seemed to not always, but so often it pandered towards the trauma porn narrative rather than giving us the full nuance and you know, just for us to just be and just, you know, why can't we talk about other stuff? Why does it have to be a specific narrative that to meet the Western media's and views of who we are? So this book this Arabic Queer in many ways, I hope, challenges that. It's our way of taking back ownership of our narrative and to sort of celebrate our agency. And I just told all the writers I worked with, I said to them, you know what, like, think of a story that you want to tell that you haven't had a chance to tell, and just think of it as you're writing for yourself, and don't worry about the white person who's going to read the book. Don't worry about who's going to read the book. This is your story, and I want you to sort of share that in your own way. And by a pure stroke of luck, every single essay that I got in here was different. There's not much overlap, which I'm really, really happy about. And yeah, I think that's one of the things I'm most proud about, how all the 18 chapters are so unique and so different. I'm going to just quickly read something from, it feels a bit weird reading someone else's work. But this chapter, I guess, in many ways, epitomizes one of the many reasons, or among them. I'm getting my grammar all wrong this tonight. Sorry about that. But why this book came about is the chapter called "An August, a September, and My Mother," and the author is Amina. It's the pseudonym for a writer I worked with in Cairo, in Egypt. Somewhere over Hague's Vale Inn, under Hammer's voice, the woman I love laughs, and everything inside me reaches up to hear it better. She holds me by the waist, hands light and then enveloping. Our hips magnetize and we dance. I tilt my head onto her shoulder and I laugh too, loudly and at nothing. In joy or disbelief? I'm not sure. It is 22nd of September 2017, and in the concert area of a mega mall, 35,000 people gather for Mashrooq Layla's biggest ever show in Cairo. The air feels a little delirious, maybe from the heat or the crowd or the cheap tequila flavored beer or our friends smuggled in for us. Barely 20 meters in front of me, 3 of those 35,000 people raise rainbow flags like wings. They are magnificent and the crowd goes wild. They catch a bit of wind and the multicolored things, which ugly men will later swear on TV were smuggled across borders to ruin our great nation, are nothing but bright. Their colors glow under the spotlights as they soar above brave shoulders, beacons in the night. I see a man morphed by my memory into the worst of faceless, middle-aged Egyptian men. Pick a fight with a flag bearer. The latter spins, wielding the rainbow in one hand like a threat and a flaming sword. He barks so fiercely that the man who accosted him walks off with his tail between his legs, looking over his shoulder like he's planning revenge. We cheer for the hero flag bearer more than we do for our favourite songs. This is all happening in the festival grounds of a mega mall. 500 meters away from us, upper middle class Egyptian families are treating themselves to a Friday night dinner at Paul or Chili's, sure to nab a table with a view of the dancing fountain, while Hamed sings about us and for us. We scream and the ground quakes under our feet, and one guy walks around in a bunny suit and makes people laugh, and two young men who don't know any different kiss. And she smiles against my cheek, and it feels like pride. 35,000 people, bigger than protest, and it feels like pride. Not across oceans and borders among strangers, drunk at a parade in a town that does not despise or know us, but here in Cairo. We will repeat it often in the months to follow, to friends who were not here, to skeptics, to ourselves, and in that moment, it felt like pride. A month before the concert, it is August. We are meters away from my grandfather's beach house, my grandfather, who would have loved you if he could. My mother, who absolutely loved you, if only as the ever-polite best friend, is waiting up for us as we come back from what she thinks is a night out. It is 2 a.m. and we are sitting on a white bench at the edge of the water. Our lips taste like salt, save for a few teenage stragglers kicking up sand as they walk past. We are alone. The wind picks up and our bodies grow impatient to get home, where we are young and gasping, and every muffled moan is urgent. Before we leave, you say you want to see a shooting star. With my face pressed to your cheek, my hands resting in the home of your waist, I whisper, harder, into your skin. I kissed you, 3 slow kisses into the smiling apple of your cheek. For a breath, everything pauses before a piercing meteorite splits the sky into 2. Years later, after you are long gone, I will still be able to hear the gasp that flies out of your lips, your body rising as you're about to meet the star where it lands. I think that is when you start calling me magic. I think that is when I start believing in God. Like Jibreel coming down from Hira, like a heavenly voice rising and easing an anxious prophet, like the Red Sea split to salvation, God pierced the sky for me. In another life, one where I do not lie about love, I rush home to tell my mother. I crouch at the edge of her prayer rug and prattle off like I do about every happiness that would not break her heart. She looks up from where she kneels, a gentle lecture about God and science and thankfulness floating from her lips. She shakes her head and ushers me away as she does one more ra'a, keeps the forehead to the floor a little longer, ask God to keep me happy, ask God to keep me safe. Further right of the crowd, probably 10,000 bodies away, another constellation of flags shimmers, each a lighthouse to us and each other. I will never know which was Sarah's. I do not know if the person in front of me who climbs on someone's shoulders and spreads the flag behind them like wings, so close we can always jump aboard, is Sarah. I do not know if I watch as the photo of her apophysis is taken, but I know that right then it is joyful and fortifying and makes us scream as we reach for each other with abandon. Desire spills out of us and we do not hurry. As we are trained to pick it up and hide it away from idiot eyes. The night is all glory and we are out. The night is ours. 2 boys in mesh, which they will later cover up with hoodies, kiss, and a girl with a septum piercing that she will later turn inwards falls in love with the first girl she flirts with, and a couple, who I will later see on Instagram marrying other people, borrow a flag for a kiss. That night, we fall asleep in the boundless love of Sarah's Cairo. But the following day, the air sours. Angry men call us vile on national TV. As my mother asked me if that wasn't the concert I was at last night, I clutch my mug, the roll of my eyes a well-rehearsed lifebuoy that I hope will buy me enough time before I have to respond. A strip of fabric hails Armageddon, they say, a Western import come to destroy Egypt. A moral decay infests the rich kids of private universities. I sip my tea and force to laugh, and the corner of my eye bores into my mother. 30,000 homosexuals, one of the men screams. An orgy, a satanic ritual, a group wedding in disguise. I call it bullshit, and maybe my mother doesn't hear the terror that's moved into my voice. They read from a script. The police must launch an investigation. Someone must be held accountable. Someone must be punished. The onslaught is endless. Talk show hosts consider us with all the compassion of homeowners deciding what to do with a dog they're not sure is rabid. They debate putting us down or driving us to another neighborhood where we will be someone else's problem. My mother gets bored and switches the channel and I retreat. Those of us who do not have reason to fear a sudden pounding at the door lie awake in the same darkness that night, pinned to our beds by the cruel glare of our mobile phones, as childhood friends and loved ones who will be neither friends nor loved when the sun comes up, debate our humanity. They will do this again in 3 years' time when Sara is gone, but I do not know that yet. So, again, just before I wrap, I should have given some context. That chapter was the concert Amina refers to was the concert at Mashrut Layla, which is a Lebanese pop rock band. They have lead singer Hamed Zino, who also contributed in my book, is openly gay. And they were performing in Cairo, and at that concert, a couple of people raised the rainbow flag, and it kind of got massive media attention, not just in Egypt for the worst reason, but also worldwide. And one of those flag bearers, Sara Hegazi, who Amina refers to in her chapter, ends up getting arrested, beaten, tortured, harassed in prison, and then she goes to Canada as a refugee, asylum seeker, and 3 years later she takes on her life, unfortunately, and that reached headlines in 2020 or 2021. So yeah, so that was, I should have given that context before. I apologize, but that's only a little bit of Amina's chapter. I just hope it gives you a bit of a taste of what this Arabic Queer is about. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for that snapshot of this extraordinary book. And again, it's an edited collection. So this is one that has so many voices. So thank you for being here on behalf of all the contributors.
Thank you. Good luck, everyone. And one final thing, free Palestine.
Yes, absolutely. And we will say a few words, I'm sure, at the end on Gaza. And there are already some questions that have come in around pinkwashing in this particular moment as a weapon of the Israeli government. And so we will come back to that. But yes, next up, I'm going to ask for Avia Sarah Day and Shanice Octavia McBean to come up to tell us a little bit more about Abolition Revolution.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I've got a little bit to say and a really short reading. And yes, thank you so much. It's such an honor to be shortlisted for the Bread and Roses Prize. So many of the books that have won this prize have to even be anywhere associated with so many of the books that have won this prize in previous years is just, yeah, I'm so gassed. About a bit about the book, Abolition Revolution, written by myself and my comrade and friend Shanice McBean, who's on the call. The book provides a guide to prison and police abolitionist theory and practice in Britain today, connecting the contemporary carceral systems, policing, prisons, with histories of imperialism, and also documents a kind of emerging and flourishing British abolitionist movement that came out of Black Lives Matter 2020, and also uprisings that came out after the police murder of Sarah Everard. And our core argument is that to abolish the police, prisons, borders, we have to confront the legacy of empire, and that an abolitionist future must be connected to broader anti-capitalist, anti-colonial and revolutionary struggle. Should say the book was written with over 10 years, maybe more, of experience in organising our respective experience, collective experience organising anti-racist, feminist and anti-capitalist movements, and was also written very much in dialogue with those movements. I don't know if you want to add anything, Shanice, before I do this small reading.
Yeah, sure. I've got a little reading as well, so I can do that afterwards. But yeah, the book was very much intended to be a conversation with the movement, mostly the movement in the UK, but also kind of globally. And I think what we really try to do is to make the arguments accessible and relatable around, the impact that policing and prisons have on our day-to-day lives. But also, I think to really make a practical argument for what you can do and how you can get involved in challenging carceral systems, challenging police power, challenging police violence. So that's why kind of we structured it as a book that has a wider narrative, calling out carceral feminism, for example, calling out the ideology of race that underpins policing, making the connections to empire and imperialism. But it's structured in 16 theses that allow you to read each section independently from the others. And so we did that in order for it to be a book that you can engage in activist spaces, or in spaces that aren't academic, but where the ideas might be really relevant. And then we end with a conversation at the end of the book of activists coming together, kind of, I think it represents what we intended the book to be, which is a conversation rather than a blueprint for how we might develop and grow in abolitionist politics in the UK.
Going to do this very, very quick reading. I'll hand back over to Shanice. At the height of global revolutionary fervour in 1968, French students withdrew their consent by proactively defending themselves against police brutality, eventually sparking a general strike that involved 11 million workers. Seeing students resist the state on the streets gave workers the confidence to exercise their own lever of power to withdraw their labour and bring the country to a standstill. Simultaneously withdrawing labour in the workplace and withdrawing consent from policing would drain the lifeblood of oppression by making capitalist, exploitation, and state violence impossible. In the words of Marxist revolutionary Rosa Luxemburg, political and economic strikes, mass strikes and partial strikes, demonstrative strikes and fighting strikes, general strikes of individual branches of industry and general strikes in individual towns, peaceful wage struggles and street massacres, barricade fighting, all these run through one another, run side by side, cross one another, flow in and over one another. It is a ceaselessly moving, changing sea of phenomena. Today, systems of exploitation and control have been turbocharged across the globe in a bid to subdue the revolutionary potential of ordinary people. This can only be beaten with deep, sustained internationalist solidarity. We must build internationalist infrastructure, share skills and strategies to resist and support each other's work to resist capitalist exploitation and state enforcement. A serious project to end police violence and the siege of marginalized communities cannot be anything but revolutionary. A total transformation of the international world order, the unequivocal abolition of the conditions that give rise to policing, and a rebuilding in the interests of ordinary folk as equals, as collaborators, as comrades. Abolition, revolution, now.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. Shanice, did you have a reading next? Oh, I think it might just be frozen because of your microphone being on. Maybe just off.
You hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think my internet's a little bit unstable, sorry. Thing that I was going to do, which I think Avia on the struggle, and I think the book also was having a vision for what a different society could look like. So I'll just do a short reading on kind of what we were hoping the vision of the book would be. So one of our aims in writing this book is to contribute to a growing body of work, carving out space for UK voices and ideas and strategies in what can otherwise be a US-centric movement. Some of the boldest rehearsals in revolutionary anti-racism began in the States, from the Black Panther Party workers and the Memphis sanitation strikes and the Attica prison uprising. As slavery ended and capitalist wage labour emerged, criminalisation and law enforcement stepped up to restructure race and class relations in the US. So it's no surprise that those conditions birthed a movement to end uprisings that come out of the legacies of policing in the colony. For UK politics to continue is
One sec, Shanice. I think the connection is dropping a little bit just now, too much to be able to hear your full reading.
we can come back to it.
Do you want to see whether or not you can get your connect either closer to the router, whatever the magic is that does the thing where the internet suddenly works better? And then we can loop back, just because I'd hate for people to lose what you're reading. So if we if you want to, we'll wrap up this wee bit. We will go on to Jeffrey, and then we will loop back, which gives you a wee minute to figure out whether or not, even I think if you make it a lower resolution on your end, so it's eating up less of your bandwidth, that might help. Okay, all right. So we are going to hear from one last speaker, and then we are going to loop back to Abolition Revolution. Hi. So last, but by no means least, I heard what you said. So Jeffrey Barchett, will you introduce your extraordinary book?
Yeah, let's do it. All you aspiring authors out there, people that are looking to get published, something they never tell you is that when you write and I wrote my first published book, I wrote it like 2015 or whatever, but it came out about 2016. At that point, I've been teaching for about 9 years because I trained to teach in 2007. This is all going to make sense in a minute. Stay with me. And so I write this book. It's called Hold Tight. It's about Black masculinity, millennials, and the meaning of grime, which is a genre of music. And then people read it. Some of my colleagues read it. And one of the things which jumps out to me, which is one of the chapter headings in I Heard What You Said, is, wow, this stuff's been in your head this whole time. What that person meant to say was, wow, you've been Black this whole time. Because how would you know that I was Black until you read my book about being a Black person in a majority white country? It was my little secret. There was no way of knowing. And so the moral of the story is that there's a reason why I didn't talk about being Black in education, which is one of our biggest pillars in terms of institutions that hold society up, right? And you know the reason. It's because I was scared. Right? It's a scary thing to be marginalized, to use that term, in a system in which there is a dominant identity. And when we're talking about white supremacy, we're talking about one of the most dominant identities. So I was in the belly of the beast as a Black teacher in a white system. And that's what I Heard What You Said is all about. The chapter headings are basically things that I've heard. So if you like free money, listen carefully. Here's how you can write your own book in the same style. Just take things you've heard from your perspective, however you see yourself within a wider system, write them down, and the anecdotes will just come to you. And each one of those interactions tells you something about where you're at. And that is what the book is. But it's actually quite a thrilling read. This is the hardback cover because I'm at my mum's house and she proudly has the hardback. It's quite a thrilling read because I go on a journey. And I was having a look now because I haven't read it in a while. And I'm saying some stuff at the end, like, check out these bars. Hold on. It says, ultimately, we need to equip ourselves with the tools required to dismantle racist structures. This means education, knowledge, and a deeper understanding of race history, obviously. It means being brave enough to name whiteness and expose the constructs that normalize its dominance. That's the part that took me 9 years to work up to actually just name the thing that was impacting me every day and impacting the communities that I engage with and the children that are of those communities and the other peers of mine who were in those systems, like my colleagues, all those teachers out there. Big yourselves up. It means examining where we've been to understand where we are, revealing the hidden narratives and spotlighting the hidden heroes. This bit's good. Structural racism asks us to continually build whiteness into the structure of society. And this is a process we learn at school. Learning to do the opposite is a daunting task. The tools might be heavy and many people won't know how to use them, but we all need to learn how. It makes you stronger. If nothing else, a lifetime navigating race has forced me to be resilient, courageous, and most important, empathetic to anyone in a marginalized position. So you can see how much this has meant for me as my own, personal journey has developed, and my growth as someone who's thinking about what you might call radical positions, but these positions are not radical. Basically, seeking out the truth of a situation is the only way you'll ever fix the apparent problems. And that's what I aimed to do if I heard what you said. I'm not going to go on any longer there. I'm just going to say a big thank you to everyone who is listening to this now. And thank you, obviously, to Bread and Roses. And yeah, all these books are incredible. And I'm learning a lot just by listening to people give us little snippets now. So I'm sure you are too at home. That's it. I'm done. Move on to the next person. Hurry up.
Short and sweet. Thank you so much for that. I'm wondering if we can invite Shanice back on for that little clip of a reading, and then I have lots of audience questions, and I'll invite everyone back onto the screen to answer those.
We can try. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I'll keep my camera off. So it's just a short. I've made it even a shorter reading. So this book isn't just an exercise in contextualization. We want to contribute to a growing understanding of abolition that grounds abolitionist politics in a revolutionary vision, a vision that requires us to change nothing short of everything. We're not content with posturing on the sidelines of history. We don't mean a vague, undefined, almost romantic notion of revolution, where you don't know if the revolution is being made on the barricades or in the boardroom. We mean a steadfastly proletarian project where those on whose back the world was built are the ones who make the future. We are done with academics and influencers who use the language of abolition to give themselves a marketable edginess, lining their pockets with corporate deals, whilst refusing to call themselves anti-capitalists, talking about abolition whilst walking the system. Our abolitionism is to be judged by the extent to which it weakens the state's monopoly on violence and coercion against the global working and underclasses. So I think that just gives you a little bit of a flavour of the tone and, I guess, the intervention that our book was hoping to be.
I think it's a great snippet to pull out. Can I invite everyone to pop on their cameras and join us all together? And I'm going to chuck the first question out there. The one from Claudia, which was, do you think of your own writing as radical? And no one is leaning backwards, so I'm just going to pick on you first, Jeffrey, because you're not muted.
Oh, cool. That's what I didn't realize. That's the system, yeah? All right. Do I think of my own writing as radical? No, if I'm being completely honest, because I only center two things. I center the truth and joy, because you must seek joy. But the truth is often something which people find challenging purely because we're raised in systems that have the gravity of oppression built into them. So you start to push towards truths that people with a vantage point or a perspective can offer, and it feels destabilizing. It feels radical. It feels like a problem. And essentially, that's not what you're trying to do. You aren't trying to shake things up for the sake of shaking things up. You're trying to illuminate. So personally, the act of trying to illuminate, if that's seen as radical, it's probably because what we think is normal is completely abnormal and weird and needs to be undone. That's the weird thing. What we're doing here in this Zoom and all these authors, we're doing the sensible thing. We're doing what's actually quite logical and reasonable in many ways. That's my long-winded answer to your question. What do you think?
Yeah. I think that speaks to me as a bookseller in a radical bookshop. Do I have anyone else who wants to drop in?
I just might jump in quickly
Sure.
to say that I'm a big fan of polemic, and I'm a big fan of ideology. And what I mean by that is, we all have a particular framework and way of understanding the world. And I think that some of ways of understanding the world harm us more than others. And so I do see abolition revolution as an ideological intervention. It's trying to persuade and move. It's trying to change hearts and minds. It's trying to move people to a vision. So in that sense, I do see it as radical. But I agree with what Jeffrey said. We're also trying to speak truth to power. So in that sense, we're also just describing a reality. And you might say that that description is radical in terms of what we want to come out of it. But actually, we are just also speaking our truth. So I would say, yes, on the one hand, I do understand the project that we try to contribute to as revolutionary. But at the same time, yeah, revolution is, I guess, is a project for our hearts and minds. So I think we see it through that lens.
Beautifully put. Ione, did you want to add something? Do you think of your writing as radical?
I think just to like echo what Jeffrey and Shanice said, I think it makes sense, and I think you can only live your life and speak about things that make sense to you. And there's so much of the world that doesn't make sense, and how people are treated and how people are oppressed that seems completely nonsensical. So if by putting out my point of view or the way that I see things helps, you know, other people that maybe think the world doesn't make sense, make sense of it, or the way that they're treated make sense of it, then I think that can be a radical act. But I think when we, you know, I think my writing only becomes radical when people action it in their own lives, like whether it's how they change the way they think about disability and chronic illness, or whether it's that they are disabled and chronically ill and can like find relief in that writing, or whether reading about it, you know, kind of changes like, oh, well, maybe feminism isn't a slogan t-shirt. It's actually like a way you have to, you know, it's actually a political movement, not an identity. I think that's when things become radical. It's when, you know, they really reach other people and can work to change things.
Brilliant. Did anyone else want to speak to whether or not they see their own writing as radical? Yeah, go for it, Ilyas.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Jeffrey, what you're saying about how it's what things that are normal for us don't seem radical to us on a personal level. But I think what is unique about this Arab is Queer is that it's sort of like probably radical for outsiders, but on two fronts. So on one front, you've got like the mainstream Western audiences who don't know much about our experiences because we're not given that platform that often. And the other front, we've got the homophobia and transphobia that's rampant in our culture. And we're challenging that, and we're sort of celebrating our existence, celebrating our love and joy and everything in between, even sex, even like, you know, sex is such a big stigma in our culture, and there are some explicit sex scenes in this book, and I think that in many ways is radical because we're challenging the patriarchy, we're challenging all those entrenched norms that put people in corners and sort of. And saying there's another way of being able to celebrate who we are without having to sort of pander to these patriarchal norms. So yeah, so for those people, it's probably they would see us as radical, but for them, radical is a bad thing. But for us, radical is all about love and joy and celebrating. It's just a great thing. So yeah,
that's such a good point.
Yeah,
Kojo.
I guess. Yeah, I think I'll just conclude with. Yeah, there's a fantastic line from Jimmy Baldwin where he suggests that, you know, there's something terribly radical about believing that one's own experiences are enough to even speak about, never mind write about, to consider that they are as much worthy of great literature as, sorry, I have a Afro child leading into the frame, but as much worthy of great literature as the narratives that we are sold and instilled in from when we're young. So, you know, I think that speaks to the potential power of a radical approach to writing, as well as what we're actually writing about.
Thank you. I'm conscious of time, so I'm just going to throw one last question for people to give their thoughts on, and then I will announce our winner. Which was a question from Salim, who said, in light of Israel's genocide in Gaza, of continued deaths in police custody, of COVID's effect on vulnerable populations, do you as writers really think that books can make a difference? If so, how? So yeah, just an easy little one at the end. Does anyone want to jump in on whether or not you as writers or as readers think that books can change the world? Yeah, so I'm going to first go to Aria and then we'll have Ilias.
I think this is a really important question. First of all, free Palestine and down with all colonizers. I think, one of the things that I'm thinking about in terms of, the book that we wrote was very much in dialogue with movement, and was also, we were writing it alongside a movement was kind of growing and flourishing and shifting and changing. And that meant that, like, we could engage with that, and our writing was very live, and there were serious challenges to that. I have personally, I have conflict between like, is writing taking me away from organizing? How much is that okay? What is the right balance to get between that? And is the writing that I'm doing and what I'm producing going to further that movement in a way that, like, it's okay to take that time away? And I never really fully know the balance on that. And personally, I ended up, probably working way too hard and not getting enough sleep by not being balanced about that. But I think, for me, I think that, books can change things, and it is important to document and provide theory and understanding, and, as Shanice was saying, ideology to kind of push and be in conversation with movements. And that is the really important thing. I would say, I wonder if sometimes, the kind of books that get commissioned, especially radical books that are in conversation with movements, could be shorter. We could produce more pamphlets or shorter kind of like manuscripts to kind of engage in that way, because the writing process takes a long time, and as a dyslexic writer, it takes me a really long time. And so I think there are ways in which we can write books or produce things that are more amenable to the way our movements are working and growing and emerging, and less so the way that publishing traditionally works and that side of things. So I think it's incredibly important. And yeah, free Palestine.
Such a powerful answer. Ilias, yours.
I'll speak to this specifically on the Israel genocide in Gaza thing, because I am Palestinian myself, and I do have my ancestors all come from Gaza. And I've still got some distant relatives who live there. So that's a bit personal for me. So I guess first and foremost, I view writing or any form of creative arts is a form of resistance. And I think it's a really powerful form of resistance because it's non-violent, and it's something that is very subjective as well. And it's so many varied forms of art, varied forms of stories can come out of that. And this is why we're seeing the Israeli regime, the Zionist regime, has been targeting journalists, has been targeting artists, has been targeting writers, and assassinating them and killing them in the genocidal assault of Gaza for the past almost 5 months. Because they are threatened by the stories that they're telling, and they're threatened by the fact that they are actually telling stories from the ground. And even a lot of their stories, apart from the journalists who obviously focus on the political stuff and reporting from the ground, all the artists and the writers, they're not necessarily political, but they're just sharing they're speaking their truth. They're talking about their experiences in Gaza, living under occupation. And it's threatening to the Zionist regime because it challenges their narrative of what they stand for and what they supposedly stand for. And as a queer person who's Palestinian, like, my existence is a form of resistance, and my writing is a form of resistance, because I'm constantly challenging these pinkwashing narratives, and just showing that it is possible to be proud to be Palestinian and gay at the same time. Of course, it's not perfect, but whenever is it perfect to be in any culture? Rather than just sort of go with that rosy, let's all be supporters of the Zionist regime and genocidal government. But yeah, so I'll stop talking because I won't take too much time.
No, thank you for that. And I think it's an important observation in, like, who is viewed as a threat. If people view books and writers as a threat, there is something to it. Does anyone else want to speak to that question about whether or not you think books can really make a difference, especially in the times we're living in now?
I'll just add a short thing to say that I think books are absolutely essential. Memory is such a key tool of violence. You know, how the story is told about what happened in Palestine around 1948, and how that memory is distorted and abused. And it's only through capturing the real history that we can bring to light the need for justice in Palestine, the need for liberation, the need for human rights. So I think books hold on to memories, and those memories help us towards liberation.
Thank you. Unless anyone has a burning last response, I'm conscious of time, and I know some people are literally going from this to teaching and other things. So can I ask everyone to turn off your cameras, and then I will announce the winner for the 2023 Bread and Roses Award. I want to just say a big thank you to all of our shortlisted writers for joining us tonight, but also for the work that went into the books that you put out. These books are more relevant by the day, and they are perfect examples of how radical writing expands our capacity as readers to understand the challenges we're up against, and perhaps more importantly, to rise up to them. So without further ado, this year's winner is Abolition Revolution. Would our two authors please pop back on screen to say some closing remarks?
Wow. That's genuinely unexpected. Thank you so much, and just massive shout out to all the other authors. Like, honestly, it's an honor to be like considered alongside you and alongside everyone who's ever been shortlisted and won this award. Like, honestly, like some really, really amazing people, and thank you so much. This is the biggest honor. I can't say more.
I don't know if you can hear me with my camera on. Yeah, okay, wicked. Honestly, didn't expect that. What I will say is myself, Evia, and Kojo have been here before because the three of us were nominated for a previous award, and what I will say is we got you this time, Kojo. But no, I am I don't think I prepared for it to be our book. I'm really, really grateful. And I hope we can continue the conversation, because that is what the book was meant to do. It's meant to start a conversation. It was meant to, I guess, help move forward a really critical historical point. Mm-hmm. And so I'm glad we were able to contribute to that.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. Thank you to everyone. Honestly, readers, anyone who is watching online, if you have been thinking that the time was now to act, to do something, you could not do better than this stack of 5 to set you on your path. And it is so thrilling to have this book with these writers from Pluto, from A Radical Press, winning tonight. And so without further ado, I'm going to cut the live stream, and then we can all, we're going to just jump around a little bit once the feed is cut. So thank you all for watching tonight. Buy the books, support